When you're older and you go back to school, you often get the complaint that you're learning irrelevant material. At least that's what everybody uses, is that the stuff that you're actually learning at school is not applicable. It's not real world stuff. This is like the standard conclusion that everybody has. And there's a lot of truth to that. There is a lot of stuff that you learn that is not necessarily important or relevant or whatever you want to say, right? Like this is the standard approach. Why am I learning algebra when I'm never going to use algebra in my life? Um, and it's true. All of that is absolutely true, and you can't defend yourself against that. But that's not why you learn things. It's to understand a more relevant world or to be more in the real world, right? I think that that is a complete misnomer because that's not why we actually do this exercise. The reason why we often do these exercises is to think differently than how you currently understand the real world. Right? That is different. That is a different approach, right? If we wanted to understand the real world, we would be more fascinated with the here and now. You'd have to learn the news, you know, look at what's going on in your even that is not very relevant, right? Like I find news totally irrelevant to me and it's totally stupid. And it often gets me really anxious for no reason. And the best thing in that circumstance, if you want to be particularly relevant or particularly timely, is to just be better parents, be better siblings, um, really help out your neighbors, like doing those things where you are more in the here and now, right? Like right now, understanding, really being more empathetic um, to everybody that's actually around you at any given time. But the reason why you go and you learn new things, particularly as you get older, is just to have a different perspective, to see the world as if you're seeing it for the first time from somebody else, right? Because that's the thing, is that we all have different perspectives on the world, right? Like I did not grow up the same way that you did. I guarantee you did not grow up in Northern Ontario, in the little dinky town. Even if you grew up in Northern Ontario in a little dinky town, you probably grew up in Kenora and you didn't grow up in Dryden, Ontario, right? And it's a different culture, it's a different way of seeing things. And so what you do get when you go and you explore and you get, do more educational stuff or do more research or whatever, right? Like that's all research is, just kind of learning a little bit more, is to get a different perspective, to see the world in a slightly different way so you can get that, that feeling of, oh, I never thought of that before, right? And if you're in a good program or a good people are sort of pushing you in a suitable way, is that you have that all of the time. Then it's almost every week where you're like, oh, I never thought about oh, give me an example of this. Um, and it's here's the thing, is that it's not that it ever ends, right? It's not like I have these moments all the time and I relearn things. I get these moments over again. So, to give you an example, I was going through homework with my son last night. He's doing logarithms. He's in high school now, and he's doing logarithms. And I had learned the basic what logarithms mean and basic properties back in high school as well. And then I'd also done it in engineering. It was a really big thing. Um, but I forgot about what they actually mean, and I forgot about what they were, and I teach it and I use it on a daily basis today. Nobody knows what a logarithm is that's actually listening to this, but the odd person probably does, but it's just like a mathematical property. Um, so it's the idea of what power do you have to raise a number to? What do you have? How many times do you have to multiply a number by itself to get to another number? Right. That's all it's sort of saying. But I forgot what that actually meant. And I understand, I knew sort of some of the manipulations, the properties of what to do with this, but I've forgotten how to actually use it. And it wasn't until I relearned it again with my son by watching Sal Khan, right, from Khan Academies. Many of you probably know Khan Academy by now. Uh, he's got YouTube videos and like this big program. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But I had forgot about it. And it was bothering me for a long time. I'm like, why can't I understand this? I know these things, but I forget. And I relearned it, and I had a different perspective again. I was like, "Oh, now I remember." Right? And that is what you want, is that different perspective, because if you're in the moment, right, if you're learning it, we have a tendency to sort of just focus on the here and now. We have a tendency to be very, very narrow in our understanding because that's what we need to get by. That's what we need to survive. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Why would I need to know what a logarithm is? Why do I need all that kind of stuff? Well, it's because it helps you understand the world slightly differently than what you understand it before. So now I have a newfound appreciation of everything that I'm actually doing. I'm like, oh shoot. Now I remember. Now I get it. I remember doing the same thing with the denominator on, so when you do division, there's the top number, the numerator, and then the bottom number, the denominator. And man, I could not remember the names of these things. And I remember doing that when my kids were in like third grade and going through it and being like, oh, right now I remember. So, um, what I'm getting at, it's not about understanding more of what you already know, right? Like, I think that is completely useless. It's not relevant. Like, why would you actually do that? But it's just to get a different perspective. And in the social sciences, it's the same thing. We think that, the hard sciences are more relevant. In fact, they're more irrelevant if you actually understand how the stuff actually works, right? Like doing mathematics, um, is very irrelevant because it's extraordinarily abstract. Our mind typically does not think like that, right? We don't think in that abstract manner. Um, and so it's about thinking with the social sciences. We think that you're learning all these kind of whacked out ideas. And yeah, you do learn whacked out ideas. That's because many people have learned these things in the past and have done these things in the past, all these whacked out ideas, right? There is moments where it does happen, right? I hate to bring this to you, but we've been nasty and ruthless and whacked out as a species for a long, long, long time. Um, and we have to learn about these things. So why we get these things, because often how we see the world, the different perspectives of how we see the world is what we actually end up doing because we see the world in those particular ways. Right. And having more than one perspective is about how we get past many of these kind of things. Right. So that's ultimately that is the principle. I think many people forget that, but that's how science started. Was science started from the root of religion, right? Like, it was fundamentally a religious effort, and it still is. We look at all of the rituals and all this stuff. Just go to a graduation ceremony and you'll see all this ritualistic stuff. There's very, very much like you're like, oh my God, I'm back in church. Um, you know, And it's because it's so deeply rooted in the sort of religious efforts that we have those things. So, and the reason why we actually began to look differently is we just changed the way that we understood the world a little bit. A couple of people, I don't even know who started it, right? Like, um, there's a couple of people that were like, we can see if we can explain ourselves a little bit better, isn't that what we are supposed to do? Right? Isn't that being more, more of being godlike, right? Like, I'm not saying like godlike. I don't want to use that term, but more like, if we view ourselves as somewhat a creation of the world from a creator, um, then let's look at ourselves. Let's kind of understand how it actually works. And when we do that, we have to notice that, we are not like, so for example, if there's something that's causing wars or poverty or whatever, it makes us reflect on why is that these are not quite as appealing as I would like. But why is that? What are those things? And one of the things that I want, so this is really a little bit of a sidetrack here, but one of the things that I want you to understand, because you believe in, some scientific effort, doesn't mean you exclude yourself from, you know, understanding, a creator or a God or whatever, right? In a certain way they're not inseparable, right? They're not, one excludes the other, because you can come up with, so for example, in the social sciences, one of the things that we know is that there's what's called different levels of analysis or different ways that things interact. And you come down to what's called like first principles. This is often used in physics, right? They talk about first principles. What are the things, what are the basic rules that we have to understand the world? Well, we can create situations where we go to first principles where there's a couple of basic rules, and then they interact in such a way that they cause really, not so great things. So even with, it's a lengthy thing, even if, you know, a creator or God gave us some basic principles that, he was like, oh, this would be great to have, or she would be great to have these basic principles. Well, there's still ways that they could interact and that they're not all that great. And they result in things that are not so great for the world and great for humanity and great for everybody else. Right. So my point is with this is that, um, understanding the world doesn't have to be relevant. In fact, you don't want it to be relevant. I think it's like silly to be relevant because that's what you already know. You want it to be different and irrelevant and bizarre because you never thought about that before, right? It's like getting exposure. The quickest way of getting an education is grow up here, and wherever here is, you might be in Argentina right now, in some place in South America. And the quickest way to get an education is just move to another country. Go to Australia. Go live in Australia for a bit. And you'll see that, oh, my experiences are not the same. They're weird. They're different. And you're going to actually pick up on this and realize like, oh, wait. I thought the world worked like this, but in fact, it works like this way, that way, in this particular location. And that is fundamentally okay to have that. Right. And I think that's where where you have to sort of think about and be okay with the fact that, yeah, you know what? I'm not going to be relevant. I'm going to be taking stuff that I'm old fart, that I'm going to take something I'm old and crusty now, and I'm going to take and read about different things that's not going to have any practicality to it, but I'm going to understand the world slightly differently. And that is okay. right? And I think that's where that acceptance of I can say I'm gonna learn stuff that's irrelevant. I'm gonna learn stuff that just doesn't who cares, right? Like I'm going to learn what it looks like, on the head of a pin, and it seems like or, what happens on the tail of a monkey, right? And it might write an entire book, or I might read an entire book about the tail of a monkey and the tip of a tail of a monkey. And it's totally irrelevant. It's totally stupid. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to learn something. Doesn't mean that it's going to be different. And I'm going to think, yeah, you know what? I never thought about that. And that's wonderful. And that's the gift. That's what it is looking at the world in a slightly different way, where you're thinking about the world a little bit more weirdly, right? One way we could say it's abstraction, but another way to say it is I'm going to think about the weird in a weird, the world in a weird way, and that's okay to me. And sometimes I'm going to think about the world, and the weirdness is going to get overwhelming. I'm going to feel really weird. I'm going to feel all sorts of powerful emotions. That I feel embarrassed. I feel, my cheeks will get red. Sometimes I'll read something and my chest will get very tight, or I'll read something and I'll get angry. I'll get mad. But those moments, those feelings, they're okay. Those are human feelings. And those human feelings, they'll go away, and I could redo it again tomorrow and relearn about stuff that's uncomfortable, stuff that's weird, stuff that's totally irrelevant. And through this massaging, right? It's almost like you imagine like it's going in and out where you're massaging it, right? Like there's a tension. I don't know what the hell the tension is, what's causing that tension, but there is a tension. And then you relax it. And then you do that again. You do that, and you're working that brain muscle of yours. You can see the world slightly differently and be okay with it. All right. Take care and have a wonderful day.